Welcome back to the 2024 Tire Rack One Lap of America, presented by Grassroots Motorsport Magazine, with coverage this year brought to you by Hooked on Driving, Everyday Driver, and the Valente Group. Bryan and I are joined today by Becky and Karen. There you go, Bryan. So Becky, Karen, say hello, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and, more importantly, what you're bringing this year?
Hello.
Hi, everybody. So I'm back this year, looking forward to it very much. Doing something a little bit different this year. This will be the first time I'm not co-driving with Scott, and we are not taking either of our race cars. Instead, we'll be taking my co-driver's car. Karen, why don't you tell them what we're bringing?
Well, I told Scott that after COVID and a whole lot of other things, it was either going to be a motorcycle or a race car convertible. And I was probably a lot safer in a convertible, so he needed to start looking. And if you ever need to buy anything, Scott's your man. He'll find the best deal, the best place. And so he found me a little, I'm not supposed to call it a Miata, I'm supposed to call it an MX-5. It was a 2019. It had lived up in Maine. It had never been out of a garage in its life as far as overnight. I've never seen a car cleaner on a showroom. These people we didn't tell them why I was buying it because I'm not sure he would have sold it to me.
Right.
So Scott and I went up a year ago, January, and picked up my car and drove it back. He drove it back home, and I dropped him off in Michigan and came back to Indiana.
We've only ruined it a little bit since then.
Only a little bit. Nice.
Just like a little bit.
Well, it's got all the stuff we need that I feel like is going to make us safe, and it's going to make Becky feel like she can scream out there and do what she needs to do because she's our speed. I mean, obviously. And
what she means is I have a little bit more experience than her.
Well, she was the speed between her and Scott.
Seemed like this, yeah. She's way more towards Scott's end of the spectrum. Any rate, that's the car, and it's got a beautiful custom roll bar, and we've got Hans devices and the 5-point harness in it now. And Becky's going to come on Saturday, like 3 days from now, and do the Saturday run of the Porsche Club Spring Break High Performance Driver Ed. And so that little car is going to get beat to death on Saturday. So if it makes it through Saturday, we're fine.
That's at Putnam Park. So we'll get a little scouting practice in there. And it'll be my first time driving this car on track. So I needed a little bit of practice in that before.
Yeah, she's driven it to the grocery store once or twice, but that's been about it. So
not
yeah.
Okay.
So we get to go do Saturday, and I get to go do Sunday and see if I can get my head back in it, and we'll be ready.
So you touched on it a little bit, but there's a special relationship between you two in terms of how you're getting together here. So you talked for a moment about Scott, but Karen, you're Scott's mom, right?
I am.
Okay. So was this part of, like, if you're going to be together, here's what has to happen. I need to make sure that y'all can coexist for a week with me. I mean, what made this happen? When did you get the bug for this?
Karen,
I needed a co-driver, and you go ahead.
You're frozen, so you might have to go back a little bit.
You go on.
Oh, okay. So Scott and I are engaged, of course. I think most people know that. So that makes Karen my future mother-in-law.
Woo!
And,
I'm in the middle of an interview.
So we have spent some time together, staying at each other's houses, weekends and stuff. But this definitely will be kind of the biggest time that we've spent together so far. So I don't really have any concerns. But it's gonna be different. I've never done the one lap with anybody but Scott, so just that alone.
And I've never run the one lap, so here we are.
So I mean, I know
into so.
We've had husband and wives who are just married, who've done this as their honeymoon. I don't think, as far as my memory goes, and through all of Brock's stories before my memory begins there, we've ever had a mother-in-law or mother-in-law to be and a daughter-in-law. So I think that's a first. So that's going to be cool,
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
So
Trailblazers.
what's that?
We like to defy the norms.
By the door.
I think that's probably the least of the unusual things about this team.
So, and Karen, before I turn it over to Bryan for a second, what was it that got you sort of interested in the one lap to begin with? I mean, this isn't something normally somebody says, oh, you guys have done it. It sounds like fun. 4,000 miles in a car next to each other for a week in a very small car at this point, compounded by roll bars behind us, which mean you can't put the seat back at all. So let's do this together.
Yeah. Well, I think she was kind of stuck with me. I knew Mooncake had really been run hard and done beautifully. She drives that little 92 horsepower car. If you've never ridden with her, then ride with her and then talk to me, because she's amazing. But I had this car and I kind of wanted to do it. And Becky and Scott said, well, you're sure you want to do it this year? I said, well, Scott, I'm at the age where if it's not this year, it might not happen. So let's do it now. And he had the possibility of the other ride, which did come through. And so I was happy to share my car. I bring the car. That's what I bring. And I'm happy to share it with Becky.
Well, it sounds like you're also bringing your wonderful personality to the table. So we're looking forward to meeting you in person.
She's easy to get along with. She's a great lady. She's extremely knowledgeable, and I'm lucky to have her. Yeah. So.
Wow,
Awesome.
You're really putting the pressure on me. I have to live up to all those things now.
The bar is here now, Becky. It's all the way up.
Becky's blushing.
I know, right?
Look at Becky blush.
All right, Bryan, what do you got for our Becky blushing?
So you mean blushing Becky?
That one too, yeah. I talk. I know how. I've done it before.
So Becky, before you and Scott started dating and you got into the one lap, were you a big motorsports fan? And if so, what female drivers from the past sort of inspired you to raise your level and get into on track activities?
Well, so actually, Scott and I started doing one lap prep before we were dating, and one lap is what caused us to start dating. So we did our first one lap in the Miata when we had been dating for 5 months, and that Miata was completely stripped inside and roll cage and I don't think it had the cage then, but completely stripped. So it was at least this year we still have air conditioning and radio and everything. But I wouldn't say that I was a big fan of motorsport specifically before that, but I like engines and I like mechanics, and especially it's always amazing to me to see how simple machines work, like what putting together all of these simple machines can produce, which is the cars that we drive. So I had an interest in tinkering, I guess, and mechanical mindset. And I also love adventure and thrill seeking. So when I had this opportunity to do this with Scott, I thought this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for somebody like me who hasn't, been involved and hasn't worked for this at all. So of course, the first couple of years I went just as a transit driver, but as soon as I started doing track weekends with Scott, I was hooked and I wanted to learn more. And my personality just wants to absorb as much as I can and keep learning more. So really leaned into it right away. But as far as role models, I would say, because I didn't watch a lot of racing and I still don't really very much. And there's not a lot of women representing racing drivers. There's more now, but from the smaller community, if anybody is involved in grid life or knows grid life, Renee Heinz, who is the GLTC race director, is probably my biggest role model in women's racing.
Very cool. So let's hear. So you started dating through the one lap. You're taking your future mother-in-law out on the one lap. So am I going to get an email that you guys are going to ask for a venue in next year's event? Is that what we're getting?
We talked about it.
Tire rack would be a heck of a place to do it. I mean,
yeah. I mean, the banquet there is always great. We thought about it, but no, it was.
It's
It did
already
bring us
paid for as a
together.
venue. I mean, you're good.
It does make sense for us, but
Yeah.
no, we're gonna get married in a park.
Fine. Putnam?
Fenway.
There you go.
No
Right.
city park, but I'm definitely planning on having some like the F1 theme song, but as a classical cover
Uh-huh.
play at our wedding, or maybe that'll be like our walk-in song. So
There you
racing
go.
will be incorporated in some like subtle ways that only our racing
Nice.
friends will get.
So that just means next year on the one lap, you have to tie a whole bunch of cans and everything to your car as you're going around the skid pad at the beginning.
Definitely, that's a great idea. I love it.
I'm expecting that at the least. So
All
we'll have
right,
to do other
challenge
things.
accepted.
All right, Bryan, what else you got?
Well, I would pose the same question to Karen. You know, she was telling us before we started the interview that she has a picture of her from many moons ago wearing a Robertson Racing shirt with an arrow pointed down as to future driver, and what is her fanfare with motorsports over the years. And
Well, I was raised in Indianapolis, and that may not mean anything to everybody, but I mean, my dad did not know what a 3-point shot was, and he didn't know what first and 10 meant. But he could tell you every driver who'd finished in the top 3 for the last million years at Indianapolis. So it's always been, and I was amazed when I went with Scott's daddy when we were dating to a track weekend, and they had qualifications for F1 and such on Saturday, and then they raced on Sunday. And I said, "That's all?" He goes, "What do you mean that's all?" I said, "Well, there should be 3 weekends of qualifications, and then there's a big dressy ball downtown, right? A big banquet dinner." And he said, "Oh yeah, you're from Indianapolis." I said, so, and the one thing I see that's so similar is that Scott and his daddy, neither one, they've got some big smiles from time to time, but when they get out of that race car, if they're not cursing, it was these great big grins. And it's just something they both did that was not like nothing else in their life. And I'm so glad, the whole family's so glad that Becky is joining us, and so glad that Becky and Scott are doing this together, and that she seems to so far enjoy it just as much as he does. And she's got a lot of accomplishments with it that we're all proud of. So I was saying earlier, I got to that point after COVID and having been widowed, and I sat by myself on the couch for a year going, "Oh, this is fun." And I finally said to Scott, "Look, it's either going to be a motorcycle or a convertible. You want to help me find a car?" And he said, "Yeah, are you going to race it?" I said, "Well, so we ended up with the little 2019 MX-5 that had been babied. It barely had 20,000 miles on it. The first night we stop at a hotel on the way home from Maine to Indiana and Michigan. And I look at this thing, and there's sludge and crud this deep all over this poor little car, and it's going to sit out in the parking lot all night. And I patted it on the head and said, "It will get better, I promise you. We have a garage at home. It'll be all right." So anyway,
Becky, why do I get the sense that she's going to be the last person at the parking lot parties every night? I'm getting that sense right now.
I wouldn't be too shocked.
Okay.
Just wait till she meets Howard.
Oh, she's heard about Howard.
That's right. That should be fun. Okay, so event-specific question now. So obviously there's some tracks we haven't been to before, and we always sort of get to the brass tacks here. What are you both looking forward to the most, and which is going to, I think, be your most challenging track this year, do you think?
So I already have this in my mind. I'm really looking forward to High Plains.
Mm-hmm.
We went there on our first one lap in 2018, and that was the first time that I ever drove Scott's Miata on track for parade laps. And it just looks like such a wild, fun track. So I'm really looking forward to driving it at speed. Because I only did parade laps there before. And challenging, I think NCM is going to be my most challenging track, just because I've never driven it. It's a lot of corners. I've heard a lot of things, and I'm just nervous for that one.
It is. It can be an intimidating track in some ways because it's similar to Miller in the sense that there's a lot of corners and a lot of the entrances look very similar. So particularly in sort of the mid part of the course when you're doing the full course, it's easy, especially as you're going over the rise. I think it's into turn 8, 9 through 12 there. As you're going over the rise, it's very easy to sort of want to take your foot off the throttle because you think that there's a corner coming up, but there's not. It's sort of a false kind of a fake out, and then you have to go a little bit further before you get into your braking zone. And that's always the part that's tripped me up until finally, like probably the second lap or the third lap, and I'm like, no, you idiot, go. So yeah, definitely.
Well, that's good info. There's a track near us, Grattan, that has a similar portion they call the jump. So
Yep.
I'm at least a little familiar with that. I also had the privilege to ride along with Tom O'Gorman for one session at NCM. So I
What
have
does he
been
know?
on the track, but that was so it just went by so fast that I couldn't pick anything out in particular. So
Yep, absolutely. Karen, what part of the country are you most looking forward to seeing?
Oh, all of it, but you know, the track that I'm most familiar with is Putnam Park because that's, you know, I'll have had 2 weekends there after this weekend. So that's going to be my track to drive, and then we picked out 2 of the other easiest, quote unquote. So I don't know. It's all going to be bright-eyed new adventure. Wow! And if I stay awake till 6 o'clock at night, I'm going to be real excited. This is, you know. I know it's an endurance contest. I've seen these two just, you know, it's the whole. It's not just the racing. It's about the people.
Yep.
And it's about the events, and it's about seeing the whole country and going 4,000 miles in a week to race on 7 different tracks.
Absolutely.
So,
Can't argue with you there. Bryan, what else you got?
Oh, well, I've been the one asking all the questions. So you guys are
Great
bringing the
job.
MX-5. Well, yeah. So you guys are bringing the MX-5 this year. Becky, what tires are you guys running on the car?
we're going to do the Continental ECSs. We figured we've always found that to be the best tire for beginners or for learning, just because it's so hard to do anything really wrong on them. And also in case it rains, we just thought that was a risk that we didn't want to have to deal with. So we'll be covered either way. So we're going the safe route with tires.
Nice. All right, so 2 questions. First one I just forgot, so I'm going to start with the second, and then I'll see if I can remember the first. Karen, give us a good story about Scott when he was younger that we can use to blackmail him.
Yes.
and it involves racing.
You buy anything.
It involves racing. He was less than 3 years old. And I told this story to both of his grandmothers, and neither one of them believed me till they watched it. But we would be in a shopping mall or a grocery store or somewhere in public, you know, with other people around. And Scott would walk up to the single best looking lady in the entire crowd and look up and do this little head cock with those big brown eyes and say, "Daddy, race car. My daddy has a race car." And they go, "Oh, he's just," and I told his grandmas, and they went, "Oh, yeah, right." And they finally said, "I didn't believe you." And this one gentleman at the grocery store is looking at me while he's talking to this cute young thing in hot pants. And I said, "I'm in such trouble." And he said, "Well, the kid's got good taste. You've got to give him that." So there you go.
Becky, is that how he
That's
picked
true.
you up? Did he go?
No, he did not use the line "Daddy race car" to pick me up.
Was he
Daddy
like,
didn't
"Daddy
have a
race
race
car"?
car at that point.
He said, "I have race car."
Exactly right.
Ironically enough, the race car was like the reason we got together, but it wasn't.
So it still
Well,
worked.
Scott had someone else he planned to do with the one lap with, a gentleman with, you know, teenage kids. And he saw the 2 car seats that Scott put in the Miata and said, "Scott, my body's not going to fit in this car. You've got to find somebody else." And there was Becky. So
Nice.
we didn't know if what was going on exactly, and said, well, they'll either be okay at the end of the race or they'll never speak to each other again, and we'll just see what it is. So
It's,
you know,
it's how Bryan and I got started, oddly enough. It was
Pretty much.
it was 2012, and I had needed a co-driver at the last minute. My plans had fallen through, and Bryan was part of another effort that had 4 people at the time. So they just said, "Oh, well, why don't you go with him?" So we'd never met each other before. We wound up in a car together, and from that day, we've been inseparable. So it's yeah, stuff like that
I
happens.
think anybody who has the capacity to do an event like this has got to be similar in like some important ways.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
we'll see.
Being
We're still
tweaked in the
thinking
head a
if
little
I
bit
have-
doesn't hurt either.
we're trying to see if I have the capacity to do this. That keeps going around, and I mean, I have the capacity to try real hard. So I'm hoping. But yeah,
Yeah.
It's been a little intimidating. Scott keeps saying nice things, and oh, mom, you'll be fine. And
You will be. I mean, it's not the one lap that it was, sort of back when I started, where it was 9,000 miles in a week. This is, a lot kinder, gentler, more of an eye on the competition side of things. And truly, it's not something to be stressed out too much about. The transits are still a big challenge, but they're not as grueling. And the road system in this country has gotten a lot more receptive to longer distance travel. Before you used to stop at some off ramps and you never know what was there. Now you get off at, and they all look the same, right? They're all the same stores, same gas stations. They're going to be open. Pumps are going to be open. You're going to have fuel. That and when you're in the passenger seat, sleep, take a rest, relax. Don't try and do anything. Don't look up dinner reservations unless it's a short stint. You'll have about 2 hours between tanks, right, in the Miata, or roughly thereabout. Get some rest when you can do it.
um,
Yeah,
it's
fall
it's
into the
4
pace.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I know I can sleep in the car. I did it on the way back from Maine. So
It's very comfortable.
There you go. Well, we're very much looking forward to seeing you girls. What is your team name?
The team name was my idea. We are Dragons Not Swans. It's it's based off of a song that I like called "I'm a Swan," but the chorus is "I'm not a swan, pretty in a pond." So
Okay.
we're not just here to be pretty. We're here to compete.
Fair
that's a good
enough.
thing.
Fair enough. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us, or should I say dragons. We appreciate your time today, and we're very much looking forward to seeing you in just about a week's time. Bryan, you'll be out there in a week getting
Yep.
started on this. I'll be there the day after, and then we're going to start some of our live coverage. We're excited for that. But for the 2024 Tire Rack One Lap of America, presented by Grassroots Motorsport Magazine, with coverage brought to you by Hooked on Driving, Everyday Driver, and the Valente Group, I'm Solomon, that's Bryan, and these are a couple of dragons who we'll see next week. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.